a very hardworking fellow. We want to tell the young people out there that there are people that you need to look up to. Use your pen, use your voice in court, use your reach on social media, use your platform as a lawyer, use your space as a journalist. Stand up for the truth.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, fellow citizens. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to today's public lecture. We are going to be engaging in a very thought-provoking topic that has been awash on social media, the rule of law and democracy under President Donald Trump of the United States and its implication in Uganda. I am by the name Robert Benon Jirua. I am a member of the Rule of Law Department and Litigation of the Uganda Law Society. We are honored to have you here today. We would like to thank the council that is in representation at the Secretariat House for the blessing that we are here today. Would like to thank the Secretariat staff that are here with us. Would like to thank the press for being here with us, as has always been the case, and would like to thank the general public for working with us. We are the Radical New Bar under the able leadership of Isaac K. Semakade, who sends his sincere regards and wishes us the best for the day. Without further ado, I would like to welcome the CEO of the ULS to give us opening remarks so as to move forth with a program that shall be broken down accordingly. Thank you.
Senior Counsel Emeritus Andrew Kasirye, Vice President of Uganda Law Society, Professor Paul, Don, our Treasurer and Council Member North, members of Uganda Law Society online and physically here, the members of the public, the Fourth Estate, ladies and gentlemen, you're welcome for this great public lecture by Professor Paul. I'm sure we shall all enjoy it because we are all interested in rule of law. Right now, I welcome our Vice President to come and welcome our Senior Counsel Emeritus. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam CEO. Our guest speaker, Professor Paul Butler, together with Don, our guests for today, President Emeritus, Senior Counsel Andrew Kasirye, Council members present, senior members of the bar, those of you who are here physically and those online, members of the Secretariat, a good welcome to all of you and a good morning. Today we are honored to have this historic public lecture at the Uganda Law Society. This is the first time we are having one of a kind, and we are blessed to have this our distinguished professor. I will not speak about, I'll not give his accolades. Senior Counsel will do that for us, but we are very pleased and honored to have you amidst us. And I believe this public lecture is going to be of great importance, to have a great significance on our practice and our understanding of rule of law and a broader perspective. This is what the Radical New Bar brings to the membership and the general public. So we're happy to have all of you here today. I'm personally excited. I can't wait to see the unpackaging of this great lecture. So please feel at home. This is the Uganda Law Society House. Professor, if you may know, the Uganda Law Society is an association. It's a bar association for all the members, all the lawyers practicing in Uganda. Some of those are here. We have others online. We have a membership of over 6,000 members who are probably watching, who will be following this lecture. And our major focus, apart from advising government, we are custodians of the rule of law. We push for the promotion and protection of the rule of law and good governance in this country. It is a statutory mandate that we have. So members, you're welcome for today's lecture. Allow me welcome Senior Counsel Andrew Kasile. Let's put our hands together. He is the one who has the, who has the capacity to welcome our good professor to speak. So Senior Counsel, you're welcome. Let's put our hands together for Senior Counsel. Well, some of you might not know, I'm following in his footsteps. He was once a vice president of the Uganda Law Society. So I'm happy to rub shoulders.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. My name has been stated. My name is Andrew Kasile. I've been practicing law for 39 years. Many of you are not yet born, but I'm not a dinosaur. It's an honor for me to be here to introduce the distinguished professor who is our keynote speaker. I was invited by President Isaac. I decided, because I am a senior person, when Isaac was elected, I made a deliberate effort to bridge the older members of the bar, to be that bridge between the older members and the younger members. So I maintain contact with Isaac, and I hope that he will be back soon. So our keynote speaker, Professor Paul Butler, I don't think I'm even qualified to be the person introducing him. He's a very distinguished law professor with a very, very detailed resume, OCV as we call it here. Professor Paul Butler, is a professor at law at Georgetown University Law Center. I think that's his current, what we call his chair, daily chair. He's a professor at the Georgetown University, but as he does that, he's a legal analyst on MSNBC. It's a very, very popular TV channel in the United States. He's a contributing opinion writer in the Washington Post, and he hosts the PBS series Returning Citizens, Life Beyond Incarceration. I will not go into his entire profile. It will just overwhelm me and I may collapse. But it should be remiss of me not to say that not only has he been a lecturer at George Washington University Law School, he has also been a visiting professor at Harvard Law School and University of Pennsylvania Law School. He holds an honorary Doctor of Law degree from the City University of New York, and he is a consulted scholar on issues of race and criminal justice. He has profiled on many of the American media platforms. One of those is 60 Minutes, Nightline, ABC, CBS, and NBS Evening News. He's a publisher. He publishes books, writes essays in leading publications in the United States, like the Georgetown Law Journal, Yale Law Journal, Harvard Law Review, Stanford Law Review, and UCLA Law Review. I would challenge any of you to write something that they'll agree to publish in these journals. This is truly a distinguished career he has had. He has been named several times by the George Washington graduating class as the Professor of the Year. He has received accolades and awards as a top teaching scholar. Like I said, he has publications, many of which have been recognized in the United States as leading publications and books. He was a finalist of the 20th Award for the Best Nonfiction. Many of you may not know what that is, the NAACP Image Award, but your generation has Google. You can Google that, NAACP Image Award. I want to ask you to join me by giving the professor a warm round of applause as we welcome him.
Good morning. Thank you all so much for being here. It's great to see such a nice crowd here. I especially want to thank Christine, Robert, and Anthony, and the whole team for their gracious hospitality. I was so excited to receive this invitation. And thanks also to President Isaac for his leadership. I know that we all wish that he could be here with us today. And President Emeritus, thank you for gracing us with your presence, President Emeritus, and thank you for that most gracious introduction. And also special shout out to my friend Donovan Chamberlain for helping to organize this event. So this morning I want to talk about the legal aspects of Donald Trump's presidency, what the second coming of Donald Trump means for democracy and the rule of law in the United States, and also what its implications are for the great nation of Uganda. I've been a law professor for about 25 years. I teach courses in criminal law and constitutional law at Georgetown. As we heard, I'm also a legal analyst on a cable television station in the States. So as a legal analyst on TV, what that means is for the last 10 years, I've gone on television about 2 or 3 times a week and mainly talked about Donald Trump, his legal trials and travails. Before I was a law professor, I was a public prosecutor. I specialized in public corruption. And I know everyone here may not be familiar with my law school, Georgetown, so let me take a minute to brag about my school. Georgetown is the largest law school in the United States. It's ranked 14 of the more than 200 law schools in the country. And I'm proud that Georgetown has a history and tradition of working with Ugandan lawyers on human rights issues, particularly as it pertains to women's rights. So our legal clinic on international human rights work with Ugandan lawyers in several victorious lawsuits, including when the Ugandan Constitutional Court struck down sex discriminatory laws regarding divorce. Husbands could divorce for adultery, but wives could not. We also worked with Ugandan lawyers to change the law about criminal adultery, where married women could be prosecuted for adultery, but married men were immune from prosecution. We worked on the law about inheritance, including where ownership of the matrimonial property was granted to the eldest son rather than to the surviving widow. Georgetown Law School has also worked on important cases in Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, Eswatini, all under the leadership of human rights lawyers in those countries. And a lot of our cases come from a wonderful program. If I could bring up the PowerPoint, please. A lot of those cases come from a wonderful program at Georgetown Law called LAWA, LAWA stands for Leadership and Advocacy for Women in Africa. So it's a 14-month fully funded fellowship. Women who graduated from the program get an LLM, advanced law degree from Georgetown, and it's open to women human rights from Africa who are committed to returning home to their countries in order to advance the status of women and girls in their own countries throughout their careers. So far over 80 women lawyers have participated, including many from Uganda. In fact, alumni from the program created the Law and Advocacy for Women in Uganda program, also known as Law Uganda. So if you're interested in learning more about that program, you can just follow President Emeritus' suggestion and Google. So you can Google LAWA, L-A-W-A, and Georgetown, and that'll bring up information about that program. So I hope that many of the women here might be interested in that and consider applying to the program. But as we'll get to shortly, the future of the program is in jeopardy because of the Trump administration's assaults on universities in the United States and because of the potential ban on travel to the United States by people from many countries, especially African countries. So when I teach criminal law, I tell my students that my expertise comes from three sources. First, my research as a legal scholar. Second, my experiences as a federal prosecutor. When I was a prosecutor, I had 10 jury trials and probably 100 bench trials, that is, trials in front of judges. And then the third source of my expertise on criminal law is my experience as an African American man in the United States. Like many black people, I've been the subject of police harassment and even a false arrest. So all of those experiences inform this presentation as well. So I want to start with a quick overview of the US legal system and then talk a little bit about race in the United States because that's critical to understanding the Trump presidency. And then we'll do a deep dive on Trump 2.0 and the implications for Uganda. So I confess I'm far from an expert on Ugandan law. You guys are the experts there. So I'm here to learn as well as teach. So I want to leave a lot of time for discussions, questions for sure, but also your comments, your thoughts about these important issues. So, the short primer on the US legal system. Actually, this is the, I'm going to have to shift around my presentation. I'm not the presentation, but the PowerPoint. This is not the one that I wanted. Okay, yeah, so we're here. Sorry about that. So the United States, like Uganda, after the 1995 Constitution, has three branches of government. So in the United States, as in here, the president is the head of the executive branch. The United States doesn't have a prime minister. The president's powers are delineated in the Constitution. And in the judicial branch, the Supreme Court is the high court in the land. It's the court of last result. So There are important differences between the United States Supreme Court and the Ugandan Supreme Court. I think the most important difference is, unlike the Ugandan Supreme Court, the United States Supreme Court only hears a few cases every year. So each year, about 8,000 lawyers ask the court to consider their cases. The court every year hears about 70 of those cases. And since the Supreme Court doesn't accept most cases that it's asked to decide, as a practical matter, it's the Court of Appeals in the United States that has the last word on most legal issues. The United States Constitution gives relatively little power to the federal government. The 50 states are the primary government legal actors. So, for example, 90% of criminal cases are state cases, not federal cases. Crimes like murder, sexual assault, and most drug crimes, they're heard in state courts. So in the U.S., our state courts, we have 50 states, and the state courts are roughly analogous to Ugandan magistrate courts, but rather than, like here, have a high court that hears appeals, each state, each of the 50 states, has its own courts of appeal, and each state has its own Supreme Court as well. In the States, all of the decisions of the Supreme Court and courts of appeals are published. The Supreme Court's decisions are binding on all of the states and the federal government. So the U.S. isn't a common law country, but judicial precedents are set down in written opinions, and they're an important source of law. So the legislative branch of the federal government consists of two houses, the House of Representatives and the Senate. Every state, no matter what its size, has two senators. The lower house is called, again, the House of Representatives, and that's allocated by population. So big states like California have many more representatives and thus more votes in the lower house than smaller states. The House and the Senate lawmakers, legislatures, are elected by popular vote. The United States doesn't have required representation for groups like women or the disabled or youth. It's strictly by popular vote. And the United States also doesn't have customary law. Law comes from either laws, legislation passed by lawmakers, or from precedent established by judicial opinions. So if you could just leave the PowerPoint slides on, that would be the most helpful. Thank you. So, quick note about politics. The U.S. is essentially a two-party system. Republicans and Democrats. Republicans are more conservative. The Democrats are more moderate to liberal. And since I'm talking about Donald Trump, I also have to talk about the criminal justice system and how it works in the U.S. So Donald Trump is the first president in the history of our country, my country, to be charged with crimes. I'll have a lot more to say about that in a minute, but first, for an overview of how the criminal process works in the United States, let's think about another recent high-profile case, the case against the prosecution of Sean Diddy Combs. So Sean Puff Daddy Diddy Combs is the American hip-hop artist and business mogul. Do you guys know about him? Have you heard about? Yeah, so you might know that he's currently facing federal racketeering and sex trafficking charges. So he was charged. He came into the criminal legal system after his ex-girlfriend filed a civil suit accusing him of physical violence and sexual assault. So this was a civil case, not a criminal case. And he settled that civil lawsuit the day after it was filed. And he settled it for $20 million. But soon after he settled it, there was a videotape that went viral. So the videotape depicted Diddy several years earlier viciously attacking his then girlfriend in the hallway of a hotel. She's running to get away from him, and he tackles her, he kicks her, and he drags her by her hair back into the hotel room. So during the criminal trial, we learned that right after this happened, Diddy paid the hotel security guards, he paid them off. He paid $100,000 for them to make the videotape go away. It didn't go away. We don't know who had it, how it became public, but not long after Diddy settled that civil lawsuit, the videotape was broadcast on CNN and it went viral. And that was the beginning of his criminal case. Even though, again, what we saw in that horrific video happened more than 5 years before he was charged with any crime. So that's how one way that prosecutors learn about cases, through high-profile incidences. There was a sense of outrage that something had to be done. But the main way that prosecutors learn about cases that they consider bringing is when the police arrest someone. So the police hear about someone committing a crime. Police rarely see crimes themselves. They hear about someone committing a crime, and they bring the paperwork to a prosecutor's office. When I was a baby prosecutor, one of my first tasks was sitting in an office, and I'd sit at my desk, and police who just made arrests would bring their paperwork to me and a bunch of other young prosecutors. And we would decide whether to bring charges or not. In the United States, prosecutors have enormous discretion. There's no rule that says just because a crime has been committed, it has to be prosecuted. So prosecutors use different kinds of tools to determine whether a case should be brought. And some people have concerns about whether bias infects the decisions that prosecutors make. Are they, for example, more likely to bring cases against black people or Hispanic people than white people? The evidence suggests that they are. But again, prosecutors have enormous discretion. So the first stage in the criminal legal process is when the defendant is arrested, and then he's formally charged with a crime, and then there's a hearing about bail. And that is whether he can remain free prior to the case being adjudicated, or whether he should be locked up. And I'm saying he, certainly women are also the subjects of criminal prosecution. About 10% criminal cases in the US involve women. So 90%, the vast majority of people who are charged with crimes are men. So what about bail? How does that work? Many jurisdictions, most jurisdictions in the United States have what's called cash bail. So the person who is accused is told by the judge, if you pay this amount of money to the government, you can go free. And if you show up in court every day, after the case is over, you get the money back. So cash bail is good in the sense that people who are charged with crimes but not convicted, they get to go home, because in the eyes of the law, they're still innocent. You're not guilty until you've been convicted of a crime. The bad thing about cash bail is that if you're rich, you get to come home. If you're poor, you're stuck in jail. So it's not a question of the crime that you committed, it's a question of how much money you have. So now a reform that many jurisdictions use is they're getting rid of cash bail. The reality is, in the United States, almost everybody who's charged with a crime shows up in court. Whether they're, even if they haven't paid bail, they show up. So in jurisdictions that have gotten rid of cash bail, people by and large still show up for their court dates and for their trial. So when is bail not granted? There's two exceptions to when people can make bail, and that's if there's a risk that they're going to try to run away, if there's a risk that they're not going to show up in court, and if there's a concern that they're going to commit crimes while they're waiting for their trial. So Mr. Combs was not granted bail because the judge said, first of all, he was concerned that he would commit crimes while he was free. And I think there was some concern that he might use his vast resources to try to escape from the United States. So I should note also that corruption by judges or prosecutors or defense attorneys in the United States is not a big problem. It doesn't happen a lot. So there are a whole bunch of problems with the legal system in the United States, and especially the criminal legal system. But people taking bribes is not one of those problems. It's extremely rare for judges or prosecutors or defense attorneys or police officers to take bribes. So after the bail determination, then there's a schedule that's set for trial. So Mr. Combs has been in trial for about 5 weeks now. Next week, the prosecution will wrap up its case, and then the defense will begin. So there are a couple of exceptional things about Diddy's trial. One is that he's a rich person who's charged with a crime. In the United States, about 80% of people who are in prison are poor. Before they got locked up, they lived below the poverty line. And I should also say that they all had lawyers, which I know is different from many people who are charged with crimes here. In the United States, if you're charged with a crime and the punishment is more than 6 months in prison, which is true for most crimes, you're guaranteed a lawyer. And if you're poor and can't afford a lawyer, then the government provides a lawyer for you. That's from a Supreme Court case that was decided in 1963. So almost everybody who's charged with a crime in the United States does have a defense attorney who represents them at trial. There are lots of problems sometimes with the quality of the defense, but everyone does get a lawyer. So again, one exceptional thing about Diddy's case is he's a rich guy who's being charged with a crime. The other exceptional thing is that he's going to trial. In the United States, you wouldn't know this from movies, but criminal trials are really rare. Almost nobody who is charged with a crime actually goes to trial. About 90%, you can see, plead guilty. That is, one day they come to court and they say, or the defense attorney says, Your Honor, I don't want to go to trial. I want to plead guilty. Why would anyone do that? It's not because someone has beat them up or tortured them to make them confess. In the US, police aren't allowed to use torture or any kind of physical means to make people who are accused make statements. If there's proof that they did that, then the statement is excluded. It doesn't come into evidence in court. So if they're not being forced to confess, why would they confess? It's because of another coercive tactic that prosecutors use. It's not torture, it's not beating people up, it's threatening them. When I was a prosecutor, let's say that I was prosecuting someone who had stole an iPhone from a store. And let's say that the maximum punishment for that was 5 years in prison. So I'd say to the defense attorney, let's say that the defendant's name is Kwame. I'd say to the defense attorney, if Kwame comes to court and pleads guilty, I'll ask the judge to give him a year in prison. If, on the other hand, Kwame decides he wants to go to trial and he makes me go through all that trouble, if he's convicted, I'm going to ask the judge to give him 5 years in prison. So what would you do? So what 90% of people who are charged with crimes in the U.S. do is plead guilty. They do that in part based on that other chart. When people do go to trial in the U.S., about 83% are convicted. So even though there's a constitutional right to a jury trial, it's very rarely used. So all those movies you see, American movies with people going to trial, they're not a myth, but they're not the most common form of the way that cases are adjudicated. And what's not exceptional, if we can go back to the PowerPoint, please. What's not exceptional about Diddy's case is that the defendant is a black man. So you can see from the graph that black people are about 13% of the population of the United States. We're somewhere around 40% of people who are in prison in the United States. So many higher percentage of black people end up in the criminal legal system than white people or Asian American people. Hispanic people, that is people who are descended from Latin American countries, they're kind of between people and white people. So there's a higher percentage of Hispanic people who are in the criminal legal system than white people, but a lower percentage than black people. And the reason I have to talk about race when I'm talking about the US legal system, and especially when I'm talking about Donald Trump, is based on history, and it's based on things that are happening right now. So racism, white supremacy, is built into the United States Constitution. The United States has the oldest constitution in the world, but that's not a good thing, because that constitution includes terrible white supremacist violence against black people, namely slavery. So in the original Constitution, there was the Fugitive Slave Clause. So in the United States, some states were slave states and other states were free states where slavery was not allowed. If you escaped, if you were an enslaved person and you escaped to a free state, you would think that you would be free. And that was the case before the Constitution was ratified. So after the Constitution was ratified, the Fugitive Slave Clause said that if a slave ran away to a free state, he had to be returned to the state where she was a slave. The Three-Fifths Compromise, as I mentioned in the House of Representatives, you get more representatives based on the population of the state. So when the Constitution was being drafted in the late 1700s, the question was, well, what about enslaved people? In a lot of states, there were more enslaved people than there were white people. Should they count in terms of representation? Obviously, they couldn't vote, right? So should they count? The bargain that was struck was that they would count for 3/5. A slave would count for 3/5 of a white person for the purpose of representation. And the importation clause, when the Constitution was written in the United States, enslaved people were still being imported mainly from West Africa. There were a number of lawmakers who were against slavery. And so they did what white lawmakers often do when it comes to black people in the United States. They made a deal. They made a compromise. So the compromise was that the slave trade could continue until 1808, and then it had to stop. That didn't mean slavery would be over, because the children of enslaved people were also slaves. So importation of enslaved people was forbidden in the Constitution some 30 years after the Constitution was ratified, but enslavement was still allowed. So it's important to understand that background. There's an important school of jurisprudence in the United States called critical race theory. And critical race theory is in part based on all of the changes that have happened, including to the Constitution, since those horrible measures. So one change was there was an amendment, the 14th Amendment, that says that discrimination by the government is illegal. It's unconstitutional. The government has to treat everybody the same. That was the law on paper. It wasn't the law in practice. So soon after the 14th Amendment was passed, the United States started a system we call it Jim Crow, but you can think of it as apartheid. Black people in the South had to use separate toilets, separate water fountains, separate schools. And so there was this campaign by one of the greatest civil rights lawyers of all time, his name was Thurgood Marshall, to end apartheid in America. And so in 1954, he won this famous case called Brown versus Board of Education, which said that segregated schools were unconstitutional. So the schools in the South that had black schools, they were called colored schools, and white schools, they had to take those signs, at least under the law, they had to take those signs off the schoolhouse doors, and they had to allow black children and white children to go to school together. So that was in 1954. Black people had a legal right to go to whatever school they wanted to go to. And what happened after that? Not a whole lot. Things didn't change that much. There were still white-only schools in practice. They took the signs off their door, but only white kids went there. How was that enforced? Mainly by violence. If any black person wanted to have equal rights, then she was met with violence from white people. So that was how that law was enforced. And so we had this weird situation where, in the eyes of the law, black people were equal. But in practice, we weren't. We were still treated like underclass citizens. And even now, in 2025, in the United States, black people aren't equal. We're still treated as underclass citizens. And so there's this important school of jurisprudence that was started by black lawyers. It's called critical race theory. And critical race theory is trying to understand how there could be all these rights that people have, but it doesn't make a difference in their lives. So I'm going to talk in a few minutes about how the rule of law, it doesn't really seem to exist in the states since Trump 2.0. Trump doesn't respect the law, and he doesn't respect judges. He does what he wants to do. And for a lot of white people in the South, for a lot of white people in the United States, that's come as a shock. They are starting to think that they live in an authoritarian regime. But the reality is that African Americans have always lived in an authoritarian regime. We've never enjoyed the protection of the rule of law that white people have. And so again, this school of jurisprudence called critical race theory is trying to explain why that is. So it has these principles. One of the principles is about how racial progress is different from the story that we're told about it in the United States. So I think the story that we're told is that Africans were imported to the United States as enslaved people. So that was a low point. But then slavery was abolished after the most brutal war in US history, the Civil War. So that was a high point. But then American apartheid happened. That was a low point. That's the reality. The history that we're told, though, is that it's a story of steady progress. It's a story of from enslavement to Brown versus Board of Education to Barack Obama. The reality, again, is quite different. The reality is racial progress in the United States isn't on an upward trajectory. It goes up sometimes, and then it goes down, up and down. So you could see some of the high points and low points in the United States on that chart. And Barack Obama was the most recent high point, the first black president in the United States. Donald Trump is now a low point. So again, critical race theory tries to disrupt this celebratory understanding of racial progress in the United States. Another principle of critical race theory is there's something about whiteness that's central to the identity of the United States. That white people are seen as American. People who are black or Hispanic or Asian, we're not seen as American. So that's another lesson from critical race theory. I think that Donald Trump kind of proves a lot of these points from critical race theory. So here's from Ta-Nehisi Coates. Again, he's an American journalist, an expression of this idea about how important this idea of whiteness is to the identity of America. If we got rid of racism, if we got rid of white supremacy, according to critical race theorists, we wouldn't be the United States. Part of what constitutes our identity as a country is white supremacy. And Donald Trump certainly wouldn't identify as a critical race theorist. He sees it as a radical theory that needs to be abolished. He doesn't think that schools should teach it. But he kind of like embodies the concepts. Can we turn this down?
Have time to go out in this sun. Somebody said to me, "Are you glad you did it?" I said, "Absolutely," but I could have been on the best.
Here from the beginning. So can you go back to the? Okay, now let's.
That beautiful white skin that I have would be nice and tan. I got the whitest skin because I never have time to go out in this sun. Somebody said to me, "Are you glad you did it?" I said, "Absolutely," but I could have been on the best beaches in the world. I own the best beaches in the world. Could have been anywhere I wanted to be. I could have had those waves smacking me in the face. I could have said, that white, beautiful white skin that I have would be nice and tan. I got the whitest skin because I never have time to go out in this sun, but I have that beautiful white, and you know what? It could have been beautiful tan.
So, Now let's talk about Donald Trump. So the first political job Donald Trump ever had, anybody know what that was? The first political job he ever had was being president of the United States. He never run for political office before. What did he do? He was a moderately successful business person. He inherited a whole bunch of money from his dad. I think if you guys, you smart lawyers, if you inherited the kind of money that he did, you'd be way wealthier than he is now. He's not a good business person, and he still has a lot of money, but he doesn't have the huge amount of money he would have based on his inheritance if he actually was a good business person. He's not a good investor, and he's not a good entrepreneur. A number of his businesses have gone bankrupt or lost money. And his other entities, he had a university and he had a charity, and those were all closed because they were corrupt. The university was taking money from students but not educating them. The charity was taking money from donors, but it was keeping it for Donald Trump and his friends. So this is his work as a business person, his life as a business person. It was marred by corruption. His main claim to fame was he was the host of a game show on TV, a game show called Celebrity Apprentice. And because of that, because of his lack of experience, when he said that he was running for president, people didn't take him seriously. And even in his race, when he ran the first time, even though he was running against Hillary Clinton and not Barack Obama, he spent the whole campaign complaining about Obama. Obama had been the president before him. And his main complaint was a lie. The lie was that he claimed Barack Obama was a Muslim who was born in Kenya. Now, there's nothing wrong with being a Muslim born in Kenya, except that the United States Constitution says that you can only be president if you are born in the United States. And even though Obama had already been president, Trump said with absolutely no evidence that Obama was born in Kenya. And again, now he's running against Hillary Clinton, but he's spewing this lie about Barack Obama, as well as lies about Hillary Clinton and a bunch of other people. So how did he get elected? Again, different people have different theories. A lot of people think it's because of what I was telling you about the role of white supremacy in the United States. He was elected in part because he is a racist. He was elected by people who thought that Barack Obama being president disrupted this concept of the United States as a white country. And there's also a concern that the United States, in terms of its demographics, by 2050 will no longer be majority white. If you add, by 2050, about 25 years from now, if you add Hispanic people, they're the largest minority group, plus black people, plus Asian people, there'll be more in that group than there are white people. So that means that white people will be a minority. And there are a lot of white people who are very afraid of that. They actually have a name for it. It's called the Great Replacement Theory. That's part of the concern about immigrants. They think that immigrants are being brought into the country by Democrats so that white people will be a minority. So again, if you could understand how this guy who was not a great businessman, who had no political experience, and who was the host of a game show on TV, could become president of the United States. Thinking about white supremacy is one way of understanding how that could happen. So Donald Trump is president, and we'll talk about some of the things that he did during his presidency, but near the end, there were two events that became game changers. Can you advance to the next slide, please? So that's Trump becoming president, and then the slide after that. So the first event was the pandemic. And unfortunately, the video on this isn't working. If it was working, what you hear is this is a press conference Trump had early in the pandemic. And Trump downplayed the pandemic. He didn't think it was important. Again, he's not someone who really believes in or relies on science or really any kind of truth, any kind of facts. He peddles his own reality. So this is a national press conference near the beginning of the epidemic. And Trump says that Americans shouldn't take it seriously because he knows how to cure it. What's his cure? He says people drink bleach or inject antiseptic into their bodies. That will get rid of the virus. That was crazy, right? But that's what the President of the United States had said. So that's one thing that happened near the end of his presidency that kind of changed the way a lot of people felt about him. The other thing that happened was the murder of George Floyd. George Floyd was an African-American man who was killed by a police officer. The police officer put his knee on Mr. Floyd's neck. He was trying to arrest him. His knee was on the neck of Mr. Floyd for about 9 minutes. Mr. Floyd died. And I'm not going to show you that videotape. It's on videotape. Maybe you've seen it, but it's extremely traumatizing. So I'll just tell you about it. I won't show it to you. The United States is a weird country. So there's this strong white supremacist ideal that helps explain how Donald Trump could get elected not once but twice. At the same time, occasionally there's this compassion and humanity. And we saw that after the murder of George Floyd. So the murder of George Floyd inspired the largest social justice movement in the history of the United States. It happened in 2020. Police officer in May. In June, there were the biggest demonstrations in the history of the United States. The name that was given to that movement was Black Lives Matter. And if you were to go to a rally or protest by Black Lives Matter in 2020, most of the protesters were white. The pandemic was still going on, so people were concerned about going out. So many people were so. Again, this became the largest protest movement in the history of the United States. I'm a lawyer. I'm not a sociologist like my friend Donovan. I'm not a political scientist. So I can't explain this weird dynamic in the country, where on the one hand, people would vote for this white supremacist, and on the other hand, millions and millions of Americans, including white Americans, would come out to protest the murder of a black man by a white police officer. So both those things are true at the same time. And the result of Trump's ineptness with regard to the pandemic and the result of the protests involving George Floyd, those happened in June and July. The election was in November. He was running against Biden, and you all know that Biden won. So Biden's the Democrat. Biden was supportive of the movement for Black Lives. Biden approached the pandemic with science rather than Trump's lies, and the people elected him. Now, during his presidency, Donald Trump had been impeached twice. Impeached means he was charged with a crime by the House of Representatives. In the US Constitution, the House gets to charge the president with a crime, but the Senate is the judge. The Senate has a trial and votes whether to convict him. If he's convicted, he's removed from office. If he's not convicted, he remains president. So Donald Trump was charged in his first presidency with the House of Representatives for corruption twice, but both he was acquitted by the Senate. So he's no longer president, and then what happens? You all know, or many of you know, he claimed with no evidence that he really won the election. He said that it was rigged so that Biden would win. And he had this rally after the election, but before inauguration, January 6th was the date, where he summoned his supporter to the Capitol. And we're going to show the video of the riot now. And this is about a 4-minute video, but I think it's important for you to see what Trump's supporters did. And as you watch this, you all know that he was reelected after Biden on his first day in office. The people that you see rioting, they were all charged with crimes. Many were convicted and sentenced to jail. There were about 1,600 people who participated in these riots who were sentenced to crimes. The President of the United States has the power to pardon anybody who's sentenced for a crime. On his first day in office, this is just 6 months ago in January, Donald Trump pardoned all of these people. So if you could show the video too.
Witnesses saw on January 6th. Let's see the video, please. But please be advised that it contains graphic images and strong language, which many may find disturbing.
Hey, brother, we're boots on the ground here. We're moving on to Capitol now. I'll give you a boots on the ground update here in a few.
Multiple capital entries! Multiple capital entries! We're still taking metal, sharpened objects, missiles, to include bottles and rocks, and hand-thrown chemical-grade fireworks. This is now effectively a riot.
1349 hours declaring it a riot.
Okay, guys, apparently this tip of the spear has entered the Capitol building.
Those are members of the House of Representatives trying to escape them out.
If I give this up, they're going to have direct access. At least this Capitol we can defend. We gotta hold what we have.
Take your pens off.
Yeah. The fuck?
Take your pens off.
Crucial testing has blinked. 1033. I repeat, 1033. What's from the Capitol? We've been paid till we've lost our
Lock the shields! Lock them together! Lock them together! We need fresh patriots abroad! Jimmy, get him to the back! Get him to the back! Get him to the back! Let's get some fresh faces up front! All right, let me out! Can I speak to Pelosi? Yeah, we're coming, bitch! Oh, my bitch, we're coming for you too, fucking traitor!
Mike Pence is the vice president.
They've got the gallows set outside the Capitol building. It's time to start fucking using them.
Start making a list, put all those names down, and we start hunting them down one by one.
Traitors get guillotined.
Mobilize in your own cities, your own counties, storm your own Capitol buildings, and take down every one of these corrupt motherfuckers. So we fucking need to have 30,000 guns up there. That's true.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel.
They were trying.
Subscribe.
What was going on in the Capitol on that day is the votes of the presidential election were being officially certified by the House of Representatives and the Vice President of the United States. So Trump encouraged those people to go to the Capitol. He says he wanted them to peacefully protest. One reason we know that's not true is because while what you saw was happening, it was being shown on live TV all over the country, on CNN. Where was Donald Trump? He was in the White House watching it on TV like everybody else. He didn't tell them to stop. He didn't put out any kind of message. Trump was mad at the vice president, who's a member of his own party, because Trump said the vice president shouldn't participate in certifying the election. The vice president is a person of some integrity, so he said it was a fair election. I'm going to do my job as required by the Constitution. So what they were trying to do was to find the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, and to find the Vice President, Mike Trump, in that building, and you can see they wanted to hang them. So eventually, the rebellion was put down. People were killed. Police officers were injured. There had never been a scene like that. The Capitol of the United States hadn't been attacked since the British attacked it in the War of 1812. So it was a signature moment in U.S. history. But Trump, people thought he wasn't going to leave. That was January 6th. He was supposed to leave the White House on January 20th. Some people thought he wouldn't leave. He actually did leave. And then what happened after he left? If we could go to the PowerPoint now, please. Trump got charged with a bunch of crimes. So he got charged by Alvin Bragg, who's the district attorney of New York City, with financial crimes. He got charged with, by a federal prosecutor, his name was Jack Smith, with crimes related to his mishandling of national security documents and with regard to January 6th, his incitement of the rioters. And he was charged in Georgia by a black district attorney there with state crimes relating to him trying to corrupt the Georgia state election. Elections, even national elections, are run by states. And Trump, after he lost the election, he went to Georgia and he told the Georgia Secretary of State, you need to find me the votes to turn around this election. So that's a crime. He was charged with crimes. He was charged with a civil infraction by this woman, Letitia James, who's the Attorney General of the state of New York. And she convicted him. Alvin Bragg in New York also convicted him. You might have noticed that of the 4 people who prosecuted Trump after the election, 3 of them were black. And you already can anticipate from what we've learned Trump's reaction. He went after all of them. I'm not going to play these videos, but he called Alvin Bragg a monkey. He doesn't like any prosecutor, so he had bad things to say about Jack Smith. Well, what he said about black prosecutors was always inflected with race. He called Fani Willis a bitch. Her name is Swahili. He made fun of the name. He said, why isn't it Fanny? It should be Fanny, not Fani. And he said that Letitia James was ignorant and too dumb to be a lawyer. The other thing that happened after Trump's presidency, he's charged with all these crimes. He tells the Supreme Court that he can't be prosecuted for anything that he did when he was president. No lawyer thought that that was a winning argument. There was certainly a case to be made that while someone is in the White House, they can't be put on trial then. But there was no precedent that said that a president was immune for anything that he did when he was in the White House. And the Supreme Court, Trump appointed 3 of the 9 justices. There are 3 other justices who were already there who were very conservative, and 3 liberals. So it's 6 conservatives, 3 liberals. The Supreme Court agreed with Trump. It said that any official act that he did while he was president, he's immune from prosecution based on the Constitution. We talked about bribes. The Supreme Court, in its opinion, even said, you know how I said the president can pardon anybody? Well, what if Trump admitted that he took a bribe and that's why he pardoned someone? In its opinion, the Supreme Court said he couldn't be prosecuted for that because that's a power that the president has, and he can't be prosecuted. So there are 3 liberal justices, a black woman, a Hispanic woman, and a white woman. They dissented. They said that after this decision, the United States doesn't have a president anymore. We have a king. We have someone who is above the law. And after that, so he's not being prosecuted. He runs, and you already know, he won. He ran for election again. This time against Kamala Harris, a black woman. He roundly defeated her. And so since January, he's been president again. So what about implications for Uganda? I want to take a short break just because I've been talking for a while. I have about kind of 20 minutes left to talk to you about, and then I want to get your thoughts and comments. But just before the break, one way of understanding Trump's relationship, not just to Uganda, but to Africa, and not just to Africa, but to black people. Comes from something that he said during his first presidency. He said that he was talking about Haiti, and he said that Haiti and African countries are shithole nations. That's the vile thing that he says. And so now, again, we're going to take a break and then spend about 15, 20 minutes summing up and talking about how this relates to Uganda. But what you see on the screen is really all you need to know. That's the basis of his policies towards African countries, towards African Americans, and towards really anybody who's not white. So let's stretch for 10 minutes, then come back and talk about Uganda. Guys, you're welcome to get up, stand up.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. The 10 minutes are just going to be for us to think through, reflect about what has been shared. Just a few minutes, and then we can get back and now switch it and have the impact of that has just been explained, the videos that have been shared on Uganda. That is actually the crux of the discussion, because we are here and we want to appreciate the impact of Donald Trump's administration in Uganda. So thank you, feel free. There's a soft drink, water around. You can stretch your legs and we give you 10 minutes, right? Thank you.
And since January 20th, Donald Trump has been in full white supremacist mode. So we could go back to the PowerPoint, please. So thinking about his stance on immigration gives you a way in to seeing how he thinks about people who are not white Americans. He won the second time in part based on his platform on immigration. Remember what I told you about the Great Replacement theory? This idea that immigrants, black people and brown people, are coming to the United States, and it's part of a conspiracy to make white people the minority. That's how Trump has governed. So he's trying to get rid of as many black people and Hispanic people out as he can, mainly by focusing at this point on immigrants. People who've come into the country without the proper documents. If you come into the country without documents in the US, in theory and on paper, you still have rights. You have the right to due process, which means before you can be kicked out, there has to be a legal determination that you are in the country illegally. And before that determination is made, you have the right to be in the United States. In addition, if you're coming into the United States to seek asylum because you believe you're being persecuted in your home country, you have the right to be there, even if you're not a citizen, and even if you've entered the country illegally, until there's been a judgment made about whether you should be deported. Donald Trump has sent his government agents to kidnap immigrants and to take them out of the country. So the most famous case involves a man from El Salvador named Kilmar Garcia, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who had come into the United States without the proper papers, and he's been the subject of immigration proceedings. But while those proceedings are going on, he's been allowed to remain in the country. One day, Mr. Garcia was driving his son home from school. He was stopped by ICE. ICE is the immigration agency. He was stopped by ICE troops. He was first sent to a prison in Texas, and then he was put on a plane to a prison in El Salvador. And he was put on this plane with a bunch of other immigrants who were from Venezuela, who Trump claimed were members of a gang and didn't belong in the United States. This was illegal. Trump did this on the basis of an executive order, which basically means he writes on paper he wants something to happen. He calls that an executive order. And even though he doesn't have the power to do that, it happens. And there are legal challenges, but while these legal challenges are going on, the Trump administration either ignores the judges or it acts like it's listening to them, but it still does what he wants them to do. So the Supreme Court of the United States said that Kilmar Garcia had to be returned from El Salvador to the United States because he was deported without due process of law. The Trump administration said it couldn't do that because it didn't have custody. Now, Mr. Kilmar Garcia was in the custody of El Salvador, and Trump said he couldn't tell El Salvador what to do. So even though the Supreme Court said that Trump had to facilitate Mr. Garcia's return, Trump refused to do that. He defied for a while the Supreme Court. Ultimately, Garcia was returned to the United States, but then he was charged with another crime. He was charged with a crime for something that happened 5 years ago. He wasn't charged 5 years ago. Some people think that was a way of Trump saving face. At that point, at least, he wanted to act like he respected the Supreme Court. So he brought him back, but he brought him back only to charge him with a crime. So there have been a number of executive orders where, again, this is just Trump writing something on paper and saying it has to happen, and it happens. And almost all of these are illegal. So we can look at can we go back to the PowerPoint? We can look at, I'm sorry? Okay, great, thanks. What he did with what he's doing with regard to immigration is illegal. Courts are telling him it's illegal, but that's not stopping him. Trump is a dictator. He's an authoritarian. And what do authoritarians do when they are in power? They try to eradicate civil society. And in the United States, as in Uganda, important aspects of civil society include universities and lawyers, you guys. So what's Trump doing with universities? Universities get a lot of money from the federal government. For many universities, including Harvard, Trump is saying that they no longer get money from the university. That's illegal. He's doing it anyway. There are lawsuits that are challenging that, and ultimately they may be successful, but in the meantime, he's doing it anyway. With regard to lawyers, so remember how I told you that Trump was subject to 4 different criminal cases? So the lawyers who worked in those cases are all being punished by Trump now. The law firms that they went to, Trump wrote another executive order that said that those law firms cannot enter government buildings. Lawyers who work at those firms, you saw Jack Smith, who was a federal prosecutor, lawyers who work at Jack Smith's firm are not allowed to enter government buildings. That's illegal. Trump is doing it anyway. He is disregarding the rule of law. And the travel ban. So during the first administration, Trump had a list of about 7 countries. They were all either majority black or majority Muslim countries. And Trump said that those people from those countries can no longer enter the United States. The Supreme Court said that actually, in the first term, the Supreme Court said that was legal. Again, it's a very conservative court. The Supreme Court blessed that action in Trump's first term. And so now, again, remembering the great replacement theory, remember Trump's as a white supremacist, he's now greatly expanded that list. So if you look at the countries on the screen, all of those countries are either now under travel bans or subject to travel bans. And you can see almost all of those countries are predominantly black or predominantly Muslim. So you can see that's a map of the world, and look at the countries that are subject to travel bans. They're all in Africa or the Caribbean, or they're Muslim nations. That, unfortunately, is legal. It's likely to be upheld by the Supreme Court. And I'm ashamed as an American to say that Uganda is one of the countries on the potential list of bans. What Trump has said is that those countries that are subject to potential bans, he claims it's because when people from those countries come to the United States, they overstay their visas, or he says it's because there are security risks because those countries don't have reliable systems of national identification. So people get national ID cards, but they're not reliable. So if that's true, why am I saying that's racist? because there are a whole lot of people from European countries who come to the United States and overstay their visas. Trump's not barring them. There are a whole bunch of countries from in Asia that don't have reliable systems of national identification. Trump's not barring those people. The only people he's barring are people from Africa, from the Caribbean, or from predominantly Muslim nations. Again, unfortunately, that's legal. And what he's done that's not legal also has to do with aid. This is the amount of foreign aid that Uganda received from the United States last year, $285 million, mainly from the Agency for International Development. In his first week in office, Trump abolished the Agency for International Development. That is illegal. He doesn't have the power to do that. He did it anyway. He's being challenged, but in the meantime, none of that money is coming to Uganda, even though it's been allocated by the Congress of the United States. Again, he doesn't care. He writes something on paper, and he expects it to happen, and it does happen. What about tariffs? Again, this is where Trump has been somewhat of an equal opportunity agitator. So every country in the world has received tariffs. In terms of other African nations, Uganda is actually doing, I won't say okay, but it's not one of the worst hit. So the tariff that he's imposed on this country is 10%. Other African nations and other nations in other parts of the world have received higher tariffs. Can Trump just say that he's going to impose a 10% or 30% tariff on countries? No, that's illegal, but he's doing it anyway. So that's being challenged. My colleagues who are better experts in foreign trade than I am, they expect that that will be reversed, that eventually the Supreme Court will tell him that the president doesn't have the power to set tariffs. That's something that only the Congress can do. But in the meantime, those tariffs are being imposed. So again, he doesn't have the power to do this. He's doing it anyway, and it's having a devastating impact on countries all over the world, and his attacks on universities. One of the things that he's doing is saying that first, universities, they're not going to be allowed to, universities that he doesn't like won't be allowed to have students from other countries come to study at those universities. Those students have to get a student visa in order to enter the United States. So for a bunch of universities that he doesn't like, including Harvard, he's ordered his administration to revoke the visas of people who are already here and to deny visas to people who want to come to study here. He doesn't have the power to do that. It's illegal. It's being challenged in court, but you know what I'm going to say. He's doing it anyway. So, authoritarianism, it's not something that like you wake up one day and you know. You think, okay, yesterday the country turned authoritarian. Yesterday the elected leader turned into a dictator. That's what's happened in the United States. It didn't happen overnight, and a lot of people in the United States, they would say that I'm wrong. They would say that Trump has maybe gone too far, but he will be corrected by the courts. They're co-equal branches of government, the legislature, the judiciary, and the executive. And in theory, it's the Congress that's supposed to check Trump. So I mentioned that in his first administration, Trump had been impeached twice, but the Senate didn't convict him, and so that's why he remained president. When Trump beat Kamala Harris, not only did the Republicans win the executive branch of government, they also won the legislative branch. So in the House of Representatives and the Senate, there's a Republican majority, and Trump, he's still quite popular as a politician. There are a lot of people who like what he's doing, especially a lot of white people like what he's doing. And the result of that, the politics of that, is that the lawmakers, the Republicans who control the federal legislature, they're scared to death of Trump. So they don't act as a check on his power. In fact, they go along with it, even though they know what he's doing is illegal. So we have a Supreme Court that's given Trump virtually unlimited power. It says he's immune from being prosecuted for anything that he does as president. We have lawmakers, we have a legislative branch that is not serving as a check on its power. It's allowing him to do whatever he wants, even when he knows that it's illegal. And so at this point, I can't say that the rule of law exists in the United States. And the implications for Uganda are profound in terms of the millions of dollars, the $285 million that you should receive, that you will not receive. They're profound in terms of programs like the one I told you about, where a number of women Ugandan lawyers have come to my law school to get advanced degrees, a fellowship. They don't have to pay anything as long as they agree to return back, in this case to Uganda, and work on women's rights issues. Trump will not grant visas for programs like that. And tariffs, again, they're illegal, and Trump may be reversed by the Supreme Court on that, and that may or may not stop him. So I wish I had happier news to share, but I wanted you to know what's going on. You know even more than I do how this might impact this country. And I guess the last thing is, when we talk about the rule of law, I mentioned critical race theory. So critical race theory tells us that, again, for African Americans, the rule of law has never really been a thing. It's never existed, in fact. So at the same time that white people, the Ku Klux Klan was attacking black people, that was illegal. It still happened. Even after the Supreme Court said that American apartheid, black schools and white schools were illegal, we still have black schools and white schools. And I'll tell you, there's some black people in the United States now who are kind of gleeful. They're saying it's about time white people are learning and being treated like we've always been treated. They are learning what we've always known. And it's certainly true that African Americans have a different relationship with the rule of law than white people. At the same time, there have been laws that have benefited us. So I could think of the Voting Rights Act, which enable black people who had been forbidden from voting, even if not on paper, in practice. That was a law that was passed in the 1960s that vastly expanded the voting rights of black people. So I mentioned that black people are about 13% of the population of the United States. Black people are about 13% of the House of Representatives. Black people are represented in the Senate, not to the same degree. There are 4 black There are 100 senators altogether, 4 of them are black. But for the Voting Rights Act, they wouldn't be here. They wouldn't be there. Affirmative action is a program in the United States that is focused on diversity. Now sometimes it's known as diversity, equity, and inclusion. I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you or standing here talking to you without affirmative action. I got into Harvard Law School. I went to Yale College because of affirmative action. It doesn't mean I wasn't qualified. I did very well at those schools. But the reality is, before affirmative action, which was a government policy, there weren't a whole lot of people who looked like us at places like Harvard or Georgetown. Critical race theory says up and down, racial progress is cyclical. The Supreme Court has decided that the Voting Rights Act is unconstitutional. So that's going to change the number of blacks who are elected to Congress. The Supreme Court has decided that in the context of college admissions, affirmative action is unconstitutional. So I teach at the largest law school in the country. In each class we have about 500 students. I'm proud that my school practiced affirmative action. So we didn't admit anybody who wasn't qualified, but for black students, it was a plus. If they were qualified, it was a plus that they were black. So they were admitted in some instances in which white students wouldn't be admitted. The Supreme Court said that that's unconstitutional. So at my school, when we were practicing affirmative action, out of 500 students in every class, somewhere around 50 to 60 were black. The Supreme Court decided that case about 3 years ago. So now we're seeing the first classes that are admitted after that decision. In the last class, there were 18 black students. So we went from 65 students to 18 black students. So the rule of law, it turns out, is kind of a mixed blessing. Even if it is real, even if it works, it's something that's decided in the United States by a conservative Supreme Court. So it gives, with affirmative action, with voting rights, actually lawmakers created those programs, but then the Supreme Court at one point said they're constitutional. The rule of law gives, and then the rule of law takes away. The Supreme Court decides that they're not constitutional. So I'm interested, let's start talking. I'm interested in what you think about what you've heard. I'm interested in whether you believe in the rule of law. Do you think it's a thing? And then I'm also interested in whether you think that lawyers in Uganda and the United States can play a role in resisting oppressive regimes. You know, some people say that we lawyers, we're inherently conservative. So even if we're, let's say, members of an organization called Radical, in choosing to become lawyers, we're still working with what some theorists call the master's tools. So there's a famous poet in the United States. She always identified herself as a black lesbian mother. And the famous quote from her is that the master's tools cannot dismantle the master's house. The master's tools can never take apart the master's house. So one question is, are we lawyers? Are we using the master's tools for things that they're not equipped to do? If we're playing within that system, if we're using law, are we really using the tool that's designed to oppress the people who we want to protect? So that's more jurisprudential, more theoretical. Interested in what you think about that, what you think about the implications for Uganda, what you think about Trump and America's role here. So let's start. What do you think? So, Madam President, I don't know if you want to call on people or if folks raise their hand, I'm happy to call on them. Madam CEO.
Round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you.
A round of applause for the professor. Professor, we would like to take the honor to thank you for your thought-provoking presentation. We are very, very honored. Thank you so much for the ideas and the wisdom shared.
The honor is mine.
Thank you so much. We, ladies and gentlemen, are at a session of question and answer, just like the professor has requested us to engage. Of course, this is a public engagement. We as advocates over here and the public at large are subjected to the rule of law. The rule of law is exactly what is keeping us in this country, and such practices are exactly what feed us into what defines the government. The floor is open. We are going to open the floor for question and answer. Please feel free. It's a question, it's a thought, it's a concern. Questions have been asked about lawyers. What do you think? And we want to move the microphone around. Could I please get some assistance? Gwen? You have a question? Please.
My name is Golova Abe Jr. I'm a managing partner of Naikova and Golova Advocates. You said that the immigration officers in the United States consider executive orders of Trump while carrying on the enforcement of the said executive orders. But then my question would be, what takes precedence? Because already there is a constitution of the United States that all officers must uphold while performing their duties. But what we see is that executive orders are enforced vis-a-vis the Constitution. So, and the bedrock of rule of law is the Constitution. Is it that the officers are not aware of the Constitution, or it's because of the white supremacy, like you told us, the black-white supremacy in the United States? So that's my question, Professor.
So that's a great question. So what they would say is the Immigration Department is a branch of the executive, is a part of the executive branch of government. Trump is the leader of the executive branch. So Trump's their boss. So what they would say is that they are carrying out the boss's orders. So this includes people from the National Guard, who Trump has also deputized to help enforce his immigration policies. That is, to take people off the streets and send them away, even if they've lived in the United States for all or most of their lives. There was a poignant scene last week where a number of immigrants are being made to report to immigration offices, and they're told it's just for a routine status check. But when they're there, they're essentially kidnapped. Immigration agents are waiting for them, and now immigration agents, they're not popular among many people in the United States who don't support what they're doing. So now immigration agents are wearing face coverings. They're wearing masks. So we're having scenes in which people are told to report to court, believing it's just a status check. And these armed agents with face coverings grab them and put them in a van, and the next day they're in another country. When the poignant scene was a Hispanic woman received an order to show up at one of these offices for what she told was a routine status check. But now everyone is suspicious. No one believes it's just going to be a routine check. As it happens, her two children, her son and her daughter, are both members of the National Guard. And so they went with their mother to the hearing. There was nothing they could do, again, if she was going to be kidnapped, essentially, and deported. They couldn't stop that. But I think they wanted to make that point. So there might be many agents of the immigration forces and even military troops who don't support what Trump is doing, but they do it because it's their job. They need their jobs. They have families to support, and so they do it. And the other piece is, remember I said that the Supreme Court gets requests by lawyers, 8,000 requests a year to take cases, but it only takes about 70 cases. So the legal process in the United States is extremely slow. It takes a long time for a case to get to the Supreme Court. So a number of these executive orders are being challenged, and some may eventually be overturned by the Supreme Court, but that might not be for 2 or 3 or 4 years. And in the meantime, the courts are allowing Trump to issue these orders and to get away with things, even if ultimately they'll be declared unconstitutional. But by that time, there's a lot of irreparable damage that will have been done.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Counsel, Senior Counsel.
Just taking on from what the professor has said, I've been traveling to the United States for the last 20 years. The feeling in the air is different. I was there a week or so ago. I'll be coming back in July. But you now hesitate when you drive around, and of course I'm involved with immigrant communities. Ugandan diaspora is quite big, but there's that feeling that anytime ICE is going to pick them up. And one of the implications of what you have said is that the Ugandans living in the US are now at the risk of being rounded up and deported. And so for those of you who are struggling so hard to go to the United States, think twice. The feeling is different. I don't stay in the US for more than 2-3 weeks, but the feeling is definitely different. Different. There is tension. And one of the implications of what he has said, I belong to a business where we've been selling houses in the United States, and one of my assistants who has had a visa for the last 10 years was denied a visa 2 days ago. We have a conference, one of the diaspora conferences in Minnesota. She can't go because her visa was denied, and no reason was really given. She was asked how many children she has, what her salary is, and very surprisingly, she was denied a visa. So this is the direct consequences of the policy, and it's just as a word of advice to those of you who think or have an activity in the United States, do not be so disappointed. The high likelihood is that you will not get a visa now. I know I have friends in Kenya who had children graduating in the summer this year. They were all denied visas. These are well-established Kenyan legal practitioners and other professionals with properties in Kenya with no likelihood of remaining in the United States. But they've been denied visas, and I think there is no appeal process. You can reapply, and that's what they're doing. But many of them have taken it for granted. Most of those who are denied are not first-time visa holders or applicants. So, caveat emptor. America is a changing place. For you, people from shithole countries.
One of my best friends is a Nigerian lawyer who lives in the United States. He has a green card, which means he's entitled to work there and live in the United States permanently. We had a conversation yesterday. He's out of the country now. I said, when you come back, he didn't take a burner phone. So I said, when you come back to the United States, make sure you go through everything on your phone, all of your social media, and make sure there's nothing on it that would upset Donald Trump. Because now, this happens to citizens as well. Many people, when they enter the United States, immigration officers ask to see their phones. They ask for your passport. I'm sorry, for your password. And they look and see if there's anything that's anti-Trump. And if there is, you're barred from the country. Is this illegal? Is this Constitution, is it legal? No. But again, you know what I'm going to say. They're doing it anyway.
All right, thank you so much. There is a question from the audience online. We thank you so much for joining us and being engaged. One, Tumukunde Daniel writes, quite long, kindly pay attention. My question is, what's the relationship of African Americans, Africans, Afro-European, Afro-Latinos, people, etc., globally to strengthen the Black people's rights and anti-discrimination in immigration and protection of African dignity and respect in international community? He goes forth and says, then, does Professor consider himself an African, though he is born in America? Thank you. Is that clear?
I appreciate the question.
All right.
So I always think about a time that a friend of mine, who like Donovan is from the UK, we went to Goree Island in Senegal. And Goree Island is one of the places where enslaved people were taken and put on a ship for the United States. And we had a tour of Goree Island from this young man who actually lived in really a tent on the island. And this man, who was Senegalese, he could relate his family history, his father, his grandfather, his great-grandmother, his great-great-grandmother. He could go back 8 or 9 generations. African Americans, we can't do that. Our African ancestors were brought to the United States in chains, and we were denied that history. And so I absolutely think of myself as African. I'm an American as well. So I think of myself as an African American. And it's a tradition and a culture I embrace and I'm proud of. But it's also one that has a traumatic history of white violence and white cruelty. And there was another part of the question in addition to, did I think of myself as African? Can you remind me what the other part of the question was?
I think your position and on what you think about the relationship of African Americans, Africans and Afro-Europeans on fighting the Black people's rights and anti-discrimination.
So you probably know that many times Black people who are native to a country have a complicated relationship with immigrants. So if you go to South Africa, for example, you'll hear Black South Africans say vile things about Nigerians, yes, right? And people from other African countries. In the United States, Donald Trump said that one problem with immigrants is that they're taking Black jobs. What he meant was that one reason why immigrants come to the United States is that they're able to find work. But one reason they're able to find work is they accept low-paying jobs that Native Americans are unwilling to do. And so Donald Trump's theory is if there weren't all these immigrants in the United States, then again, they're taking low status jobs with Trump associates with black people, that they would, if there weren't all these immigrants, that there would be more jobs for black people. And unfortunately, there are a lot of African Americans who believe that. So there's now an effort to try to get solidarity between black people and the immigrants who are being deported, between African Americans and the Hispanics, who are the main subject. But a lot of African Americans, they don't feel that sympathetic because A, they feel like they're taking our jobs, and B, the reality is that white supremacy affects everybody, including people of color. So there are a lot of black Americans who've had racist experiences with Hispanic people, with immigrants from other countries. So that also means that there are not a lot of sympathy for them. What we know from history, what critical race theory teaches us, is if they come for immigrants on Monday, if they come for LGBT people on Tuesday, on Wednesday they will come for black people, for African Americans.
All right.
But that's a hard lesson for some African Americans to learn. So there's not the solidarity at this point that I would hope for, and that undermines the force of resistance.
All right. Thank you so much for those thought-provoking answers. We have another question. I will try to associate myself with senior counsel. I'm going to rethink my idea about traveling to the United States. I don't know about the rest, but senior counsel has guided. Shithole country, no longer Uganda. I think we shall pass it over to the other country.
But please don't think that that view is representative of the United States. It is not.
Yeah, of course.
It is not.
Of course, because we actually, the next question is more or less tracking the same question. The next question is from one Nambi Angela. She asks about a very important question that is affecting the lives of Ugandans over here. She asks, with the closure of USAID in Uganda and many other third world countries, the health sector, among many other sectors, is struggling. Where does our hope lie? Should we wait for Trump's 4-year term to end, or should our country start to create ties with other superpowers? Very deep question.
For the travel ban, wait for Trump to get out of office. So I mentioned that in his first term, Trump banned people from 7 countries, including Libya. In President Biden's first week in office, he reversed that travel ban, and so people were able to come. If there's a Democrat who is elected after Trump, and again, some people don't think we'll actually have another election. I hope that that's wrong. But if there is another election and a Democrat is elected, almost certainly in the first week, the travel ban will be reversed.
Thank you. There was a question here.
Thank you so much. My name is Rose Wachkona, and I'm very happy. Thank you so much, Professor Paul Butler, for your presentation. It almost feels as if the US is imploding from your tone of voice and the presentation made. You sounded very frustrated with the current situation, and I think I understand it just a little bit. Maybe just to add on to some of the impacts that you mentioned is the destruction of the UN. USAID was funding UN heavily, and we were using the UN as an accountability mechanism for Uganda, where our government goes wrong, we run to UN. But now without those resources and the destruction of the UN, we are now beginning to wonder, where do we go? Do we run to BRICS? What does BRICS stand for? What has been their stand on human rights, and what sort of impact it would actually have on the country? So what I wanted to say, maybe over and above the destruction of the UN, is that our leaders, by and large, support Donald Trump. When he was elected into power, there were a lot of tweets. AAA, who had sanctions, AAA is our speaker of of Parliament, and Anita Among. She tweeted and said that sanctions that were laid against her for corruption are going to be lifted. So there is a almost stamping of Donald Trump by many African leaders because they align with him. When we look at Donald Trump as Africans, he's familiar because he looks like our leaders, he acts like our leaders, he dresses like them, sounds like them, like everything about him. Sometimes I think maybe he should apply and join the African Union because all his friends are there and he would have a lovely time instead of being abused by those G7 people. In African Union, he would really have a lovely time. So maybe that is another recommendation that can be given to him. His friends are not in Europe. His friends are at this side. He should come and actually meet them. So I was wondering in my head if the issue of what the changing geopolitical situation means in terms of accountability, especially when we are looking at the destruction of systems like the UN that are no longer having the consensus that they used to have, and what that means for globalization and our ability to hold our leaders accountable in that way. Also, I was wondering if you're coming here, we are building solidarity, what then do you want us like Uganda Law Society to be able to do maybe with the Bar Association in America, to be able to support you in some of your frustrations? There are things maybe we can't change because even if you say, okay, they are going to ban visas, there is nothing much you can do about that. That is national sovereignty. A country can choose to either let you in or keep you out. That is really up to them. I'm also glad you mentioned the issue of affirmative action. When I looked at the high table, I wondered, where are the women? Vice President Anthony, you know where I'm going with this. And this is an issue that we have been really consistently begging the Uganda Law Society to be more proactive in terms of centering women in discussions that are raised by the Radical New Bar. The Radical New Bar is not just made up of men only. They are also made up of women. And there has to be a deliberate effort to include us, not just as observers, but as active participants. So those would be my only comments. Thank you so much.
So when Donald Trump made the comment about shithole countries, the Ugandan ambassador to the United States roundly condemned him. She joined a number of other ambassadors from African and Caribbean nations issuing statements that what he said was abhorrent. The president of Uganda responded by saying that he thought it was helpful that Donald Trump said that because it exposed how he really thought. And the president said that he thinks it's useful when people are transparent about their racism, and he used it as a way to argue that Africans should depend on Africans and no one else for their well-being. So that was his response. With regard to trade, certainly some people, I mentioned my friend from Nigeria. I told him I was talking to you. He's a trade lawyer. I asked, well, what should I say? And he said two things. One is that there's an important trade agreement between the United States and many African countries, including Uganda, that has allowed some very favorable exchanges, trade exchanges between Uganda and the United States. And by favorable, I mean favorable for Uganda. Of course, Trump does not like those programs, and he's likely to get rid of them. But my friend said the largest trade agreement in the world, free trade agreement in the world, is among African nations. So there are many African nations that are part of the same trade agreement, more countries than European or American or Latin American trade agreements. So at the same time there's a crisis, there's an opportunity. That's a willfully optimistic way of looking at things, but it is a way. And in terms of what this society can do, what you as lawyers can do for African Americans, I would say at this point to inspire us, to show us what resistance looks like, to show us how the law can be used to create social change where it's necessary. We're, again, authoritarianism, that's not new to African Americans, but at the same time, it's not anything that we've learned to conquer permanently. And maybe it's because the master's tools can't dismantle the master's house. Maybe it's not possible to use law to create meaningful transformation. But as lawyers, especially in this society, I know that that's something you're working on every day. So please, show us, inspire us.
All right, thank you so much. Yes, Vice President.
All right, thank you. Probably just to add on the impact, and like Professor has been discussing,
yes, please.
We've actually witnessed this firsthand. Most of you must be aware that most of our programs are funded by development partners and donors. I won't mention the names, but just before we received those, we started seeing the change on foreign policy, Donald Trump's change on foreign policy. She mentioned USAID and other organizations. We had been in talks with an organization that supports civic education and promotion of rule of law in this country. I think we had had about 2 or 3 meetings. The day we had the 3rd meeting, because they knew we were entering into a political season, we were about to have elections, and they were supposed to give us some kind of support to fund our activities in educating the public and defending victims of election violence. Because what happens here, every time we approach the election period and during elections, there's a lot of violence and abuse of human rights, and it being our mandate as Uganda Society, we try to support. So in that very meeting, we sat in the boardroom right where we were, and this is why the gentleman communicated, say, last night you saw the position of the president, and there's a total ban. They've instructed us to put a halt on any of these activities. So that is the day we're meant to discuss when to sign this agreement, so that the fund comes through. And that meeting couldn't go further. Gentleman says we have to wait for the outcome, because now we cannot continue. We also have to wait for information from back home, from the office of the secretary. So since then, we've actually not had any other communication. That was about 4 months ago, I think. So this is something we are prepared for. And one thing, if you've noticed, most people who do work in this country, civil society organizations, along the promotion, protection of rule of law and human rights, are all donor funded. The biggest percentage of these funds has been USAID or other organizations, which also receive, because this gentleman says we receive the funding from USAID, but now the foreign policy is changing. So maybe more to the question she asked, and I think another, there was another person who asked before.
Nambi.
The issue is, what do we need to do, where do we need to go? Some of you may not be aware that since 2016, for example, here in Uganda, we've been pushing for the national legal aid policy, because since Senior Council here pushed for legal aid, I think that was in 1992, and Uganda Society has spearheaded the provision of legal aid in Uganda, because they are aware out of 10, only 2 Ugandans can afford legal services. It has been strictly donor funded. All the programs we've had, donor funded. Now, when this happens, and then we cannot receive the funds, then there's a common person down there who is stuck. But it's been hard to explain to our leaders that this is a matter of national importance. It affects the economic and social development of the country. We've had the legal aid policy laying in Parliament since 2016, where we are calling for the government to take it on so that at least now we can take this as our own, and the government funds it. So now government is not funding that intervention. Even our leaders do not see sense in it. And we feel it's an issue of what our priority is. So maybe this could be a wake-up call. What Donald Trump is doing should awaken our leaders, and they realize, hey, we need to take matters into our own hands. We need to, because definitely they know all this has been happening and we are seated receiving all these services. So I think we need to rethink as a nation. And of course, we need to begin as the lawyers, as the members, to continue speaking about this. We cannot keep waiting, cannot keep leaving all this for other people. It's our role. It's our cardinal role to do that and speak out and try to help in the growth and development of a nation. Now, about affirmative action, and really from the position of the Radical New Bar and Council, what the members need to know is that we are so intentional. But again, for me, it is a call for action from the female, the members of the society and other members of the public. It shouldn't just be about the call. For example, if you look at the composition here, I think 3 of us are council members, and I'll explain. We do believe in democracy, where people stand for positions. Where are the ladies? Why aren't they coming up to stand for these positions? Because it's a call, a general call, because we need to be at the same level. Most of you might not know that Professor Bantlaya actually did reach out. He reached out and said, I have this program, and picked interest. There are so many professors there who are female who could have actually, had an interest in doing this. It's an issue of, it's a sacrifice. I can assure you, as the Uganda Society, we're not funding any, not his trip, not his air ticket, not his accommodation, nothing. But he looked out, he said, no, listen, this Uganda Society, we can actually do work around. And we did communicate and had discussions along what can be done. But it was his own initiative, not ours. We did have the discussions and support and said, oh, this could be good for us. But where are the lady professors? Now, most of us, you see council, senior council, Kasije, we tried to bridge the gap between if you see there, the Radical New Bar is operating. And there's been a big difference between this and the old guard. So we realized, okay, now in the past presidents, we have both, we reach out, say, please come, we need to work together. And if you heard him speaking from the beginning, I think he took it upon himself. He's the one who is brave enough to come out. We're not the ones who selected senior council and said, please come. But again, when you look at our intentionality, come to Secretariat, for example, I think we've intentionally made sure that from the CEO to down, every department, by the way, is headed by a lady. CEO is a lady, our HR is a lady, the head rule of law department is female. I think 70% of staff here are female. And that is how intentional we've tried to be. But we are trying to promote this, where we want the ladies to also come out and fight for this. Do it, because it shouldn't be where we just hand over and say, you get this, you get that. And I think if you look around, even in the audience, I think ladies are more than male. The female are more than female. And it is also intentional. So whereas we're having an intentional move towards affirmative action, it's important that the gender, the female, I think people understand it really differently. We try to create these platforms because we need that inclusivity. So much as we have programs where we want to have intentional programs and involvement, it's important that in the promotion and development of that affirmative action, let's have these people, the members, come up and step up and take the floor. You hold the bull by the horns, because we want to move away from that aspect of saying, because that one is a lady, we have to give this that level of competence, and it's important that you pick up. But one thing you need to know is that as the Radical New Bar, we're intentional about that, and we shall continue moving for that. That's why we keep encouraging the members to engage at the same level. We don't have that of this is male, this is female. And I think this alone explains and gives us a position, a point on where we should go and what we should do. Thank you. Council wants to add?
And I just want to add, when Fiona was president, there was a female lawyers network. I think we had a female lawyers dinner. There was a Joyce Narunga and that cohort of lawyers. They had started affirmative action within the Law Society, addressing exactly what you are speaking about. So my suggestion to you is to pick those are the foundations of what you're talking about. So please pick it up. The Joyce Narungas have now moved on. Now it's your generation, right? I think that there is a critical mass of female lawyers in the Law Society. You can stamp your authority just through the vote. That female lawyers is something you should pick up, and FIDA is also there. So please assert yourselves again. That's why we have Ruth Sebatindira and Nora Matov on the Judicial Service Commission. I think their term has expired. It was because of the assertiveness of that female lawyers network. So if you keep quiet, you sleep on your rights and opportunities. So assert yourselves and your voice will be heard.
All right, thank you so much. We appreciate those words of wisdom from Senior Counsel and the Vice President. Personally, as a student of Masters International Relations and Diplomatic Studies at Cavendish University, this lecture has been very in-depth for me. I have also found that the Trump administration has actually strained relations internationally. And the Trump administration we study and research, my thesis is on foreign policy. And I'm actually looking at that particular topic that you've spoken about, the Ugandan relationship with the America, the words that were spoken by the Trump administration and our ambassador coming out to make a statement. But again, when you look at it from beyond that, you look at the relationships that Trump has strained with the countries that were allies with the United States, because wherever the United States is, there's always going to be a stamp of Trump. We are seeing, for example, Ukraine. We've seen what has happened from Ukraine. It's actually spilled over just because Trump can't sit. You know, he has been seen to be doing deals. You know, his leadership is transactional, and all that we're speaking about, because you know, United States is a lot interested in the global market, and they have been a very big part player in the international scene. You can't move nowhere without seeing America, and then you only need to remove America and look at the because of superpower. You know, we can't discuss anything international relations without America. We are now seeing that the Americas is being looked at as dead on arrival. You know, very embarrassing, very, very traumatizing, and all what we are saying is we need to take heed, because over time, the Americas 1776 was nowhere, all right? And the British were on, and the French were on. And that might be a message for us to look back as Ugandans, because you are asking a question, what can the lawyers do? It is our role, we are educated, we don't need America to the extent that we can also stand up, all right? You cannot, like Rose was saying, we appreciate the ladies' issue, affirmative action was very important. But you can imagine the RNB has hosted a minimum of 60% ladies speaking to us. The RNB that has been running courtesy of the RNB president and the vice president, we have ladies speaking here, very dignified ladies. They come and they engage us. We are only saying, come forth. All right? And of course, it's not going to be easy because there is that fear. There is that fear and the masculinity around it. But the time is now, as Ugandans, as Africans, to look back at where the Americas is actually moving away from. Imagine the relationship between America and Mexico. Very, very fundamental. Cuba, very, very fundamental. Some of these are countries where African countries export their goods. And then the tariffs, the China-America relationship, that relationship strained effectively affects the Uganda or, you know, the African countries. So we are open to the discussion. We would love that such a lecture, which you honestly brought unto us, for which we're so grateful, would go on. You know, that relationship. Recently, the RNB had a relationship established with the bar in Britain, in the UK. We are looking for that relationship so that we can think out of the box and make sense of such relationships. It shouldn't just be a lecture and then you go, you know? So we're thankful, but again, we would like that this continues. Thank you. Yes, Donovan.
Thank you, yeah. Also, so my name is Don. My middle name is Mujisha, and I am, so I have dual citizenship. But that is only recent. I got my dual citizenship 2 years ago. And part of it is to do with one of the questions I think came from Daniel online, was about how can people of African descent unite? And so my belief is that it is also to do with economic development and finding ways to help countries to grow. So I want to come back to that briefly, but if we go to the lecture, one of the questions that I had listening was around this idea about critical race and the white supremacy that you pointed out, because on the one hand, it's a little bit confusing to me, because we're saying that Trump is very bad, and I understand there's so many so many problems with many aspects of his presidency, but at the same time, we're also saying that there's white supremacy built into America. So which is worse? You know, like to have a country where there's a structural problem, or to have a bad leader? And when we said, because I hadn't heard that before, this idea of it goes up and down. So we had, you know, one thing that was good, then we had Barack Obama that was good, and one thing that was bad. So is any of that really good in a system where it's oppression built in? And so therefore, for people of African descent who are trying to empower Africans together, you know, can we look to these structures, like you said about USAID, and can it be, you know, can we rely on things? So isn't it better to start to build for the future? Maybe it's in many years' time. But one of the things that also Anthony, Vice President, you mentioned before, and I think just now, was that only two out of 10 people in Uganda can afford their own legal fees. And you only get free legal advice for capital offenses. Whereas in America, I think you said, Paul, that it's anybody with an offense that might bring 6 months or more in prison. So you have more people who's going to get represented in America than you will in Uganda, just because of that basis. So that's the rule of law. But there's something about that sounds like there's something quite structural in America which does hold that in place. So my thought was, this is more of a thought than, I have a question, but the thought was, the structure actually is quite in place in America. So you have Donald Trump or you have Barack Obama, but you still have a structure where if you commit an offense that's going to bring more than 6 months, you're going to get legal representation. That doesn't seem like it's going to change. Underneath that, to some extent, maybe is economic development. So, because if the country here, for example, had more growth prospects or was growing better, maybe they could afford to widen out that legal aid to more people and pay for those lawyers to be able to help wider people. I don't know if that's true, maybe that's a fantasy, but what I'm interested in doing is finding ways. That's not necessarily to do with BRICS. Somebody was asking about BRICS, or do we shift to the BRICS now that the Americas are a problem? Maybe it's to do with that question about how Africans can unite. And what I'm interested in is foreign direct investment from black Westerners in America and England into Uganda via things like treasury bills and investing, so that they can get a return on their investment, but at the same time it's helping the economy. So I think there needs to be more ways like that, creative ways to get investment into Uganda, and then hopefully that can help the country to grow, and then the country itself can have better ability to provide better legal representation, for example, to a wider amount of people.
All right, twakushima munonga. Have you understood? Come again? Oh, thank you. That is Mugisha for you. Mugisha is Ugandan. Yes, you have something, Mr. Vice President? All right, thank you so much. Do we have any questions?
I was about to say Mugisha must have been in the basement.
Mugisha. Mugisha, the basement means a lot here. We hope you are not in the basement. But thank you so much for your insightful discussion. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. We are coming to a close of this function. We would like to appreciate your presence. We are still taking maybe one more question. Any in-house?
Yeah, okay.
Yes, one more before we can close. Is it okay? Two? All right.
My name is Irene Kahinju. I am an advocate, a young advocate. Well, I have a question for Professor. And Professor, would you mind to enlighten us about the Trump administration issuance of the executive order for the closure of Department of Education, leaving the power of education decisions to the state, in light of the African students that desire to pursue their education or to further their education in America. I am very much aware that there are state attorneys that opposed this in court, but I'm also aware that this same administration applied for an emergency application to stop the injunction that was issued by the judge. And so I want to ask you to enlighten us about the impact that it has on African students that would like to further their education in America. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Irene. We're going to take two more questions. There's one from the gentleman here. And then one from the treasurer. There's a microphone there. Kindly take note. Is it okay, Professor? You could write that? Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Seboriba Simon Cyrus. I'm an advocate as well. My question to Professor is in regards to the democracy part of our theme today. One big part of democracy is the electoral process. Unfortunately, your presentation, you did not really take us through the technicalities or details of, for example, how the white supremacy or the old laws or the Constitution of the United States has engraved white supremacy into leadership, say by using the electoral colleges, some states having some states having stronger voting power than others, and also maybe just oppose that with the populace, rather the population and race statistics. Thank you very much.
Yes, please proceed.
Okay,
Please. Proceed.
Okay.
He has a question?
Yes.
He has a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, Honorable Treasurer.
Thank you, Professor, for the insightful discussion about rule of law and democracy. My question is that in light of the topic of democracy, we all know democracy is a rule of majority over minority, but I would like to pick your perspective of democracy in international law, especially under the United Nations, where we have a few countries, very few, who have veto powers. In other words, more than 100 countries can take a certain decision, but probably few countries, like 5 or 4, veto such a decision.
Only 5?
Yes, only 5. So the question is the definition of democracy a fallacy? Is it something that is probably put forward to achieve certain objectives at a lower level and probably ignored at the international level? I'd like to pick your perspective over that as a professor of law and as an American citizen. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. There you go, please.
There are three excellent questions. I know we've been here for a while, so I'll try to be brief but responsive. So with the Department of Education, it has limited federal responsibilities. I mentioned that the United States is a federalist system, which with most power for everyday governing, so think policing and education, going to states, not to the federal government. So there's a couple of important responsibilities that the Department of Education had until Trump abolished it. One was to make sure that people with disabilities, students with disabilities, have the same right to a full education that everybody else has. So those are national standards. There are also still concerns about people being discriminated against on the basis of race and gender, and that's against federal law, and so the Department of Education enforced those laws, and again, that's why Trump didn't like it, because what it focused on as a federal department was equal opportunities to education for Black people, for women, for disabled people, and that's why Trump abolished the department. It also does, the State Department is the branch of the United States government that governs visas, including student visas. So that's the agency that will have the responsibility, if you will, or I'd say irresponsibility, of denying visas to people who want to come to the United States to study. And the ironic thing is that as a law professor, I think any educator would tell you that American students benefit from those foreign students at least as much as the foreign students benefit from being in the United States. So it's a mutual beneficial relationship. And again, Trump is transactional, but it's not like he's transactional for the best interest of the United States. He's transactional for his own political and financial interests. So, great question about the Electoral College. Just so people understand, again, there's a lot of problems with the fact that the United States has the oldest constitution in the world. And when the Constitution was ratified, democracy was something of a radical concept. And so even for the white men who wrote the US Constitution, the idea of directly electing the president by popular vote was scary. So they put in this middle ground. So there's a body called the Electoral College that officially elects the president. And so when I vote for Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton, I'm technically voting for an elector. And that elector is supposed to, at the end of the election, represent my vote and a bunch of other people's votes. And one of the things that happened when Trump lost the election to Biden is he said, well, the people in the Electoral College, they don't have to vote the way that they're advised to by the voters. They can do whatever they want. So even if they're voters who vote for the elector, if they want me to vote for Hillary Clinton or for Biden, they don't have to do that. They can vote for whoever they want. And again, that's not true, but it's something that Trump was urging his supporters to do. And the relationship between that and white supremacy is that the electors are determined by the number of senators and representatives. So if California has 2 senators and 15 representatives, they have 17 votes in the Electoral College. The states all have 2 senators. Most of the smaller states, states like Montana, New Hampshire, places that I'm sure many of you have never heard of, they have very few Black people. But because they're small and they still have New Hampshire, Montana, they have the same 2 senators that California and New York, huge states, have. These small almost exclusively white states have disproportionate power. And they're also disproportionately Republican. So again, they're able to get through conservative policies because of this structure of electoral college that's built into the Constitution. Again, a function of what the US likes to brag about, having the oldest Constitution. But there's a lot of problems with a Constitution that was written in 1787 by a bunch of people who included white enslavers. And then lastly, the question about the UN and the role of democracy. So there are certainly issues with the United Nations, but Donald Trump hates it, so I think there must be something good about it as well. It's true that powerful nations, rich nations have an outsized influence. But we can look at some of their actions, the way that they're standing up for people in Gaza who are being subject to inhumane, genocidal conduct. The way that they stand up for those people, I think is important and valuable. You know, your larger question was, you know, what's the role of the rule of law to defeat oppressive systems? So I had a slide with Frederick Douglass, who was born an enslaved person in the United States and then became a great abolitionist. And there's a famous quote from Frederick Douglass. He says, "Power concedes nothing without a struggle. It never has, and it never will." And so the question, I think, for all of us is, what does struggle look like to defeat power? And I think that's the conversation that we've been having. So part of what we've thought about today is that struggle must be inclusive. It must include women as well as men. I think that based on the experience of the United States under Donald Trump, I think that there's an open question about the role of law and lawyers in struggle. What can you do in your work as lawyers to help defeat oppressive systems? Again, I was asked, what can you as Ugandan lawyers do to help us in the United States? Again, show us the way. Continue to inspire us. And I think, for me at least, by your presence here, that's exactly what you are doing. And so I thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Professor, for your nuanced analysis and in-depth answer to our Honorable Treasurer. Power conceives nothing without a struggle. And that is what the RNB is about. The RNB is here under its mandate of Section 3 of the Uganda Law Society Act to try as much as possible to ensure access to justice under the rule of law. So we are in the right place. We are so honored that you can come and advise us as well in your capacity as a professor, so thank you so much. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. We are coming to the end of this session. We are done with the question and answer session. I hope there is none, and if any, the professor is a friend of the Radical New Bar. So he could be accessible through the Radical New Bar, and that is courtesy of our able leadership and the council. The council, may you be aware that we had the presence of the Attorney General of the Buganda Kingdom in representation in here. We have a message from the legal officer at the Buganda Royal Law Chambers representing the Attorney General of Buganda Kingdom, Counsel Christopher Bwanika, and the individual coming forth is an advocate of the High Court and a member of the ULS, of course, and the ELS. Ladies and gentlemen, as we come to the close, would like to invite Counsel Sebuliba Simon Cyrus to give us a message from the Attorney General of Buganda Kingdom, Counsel Christopher Bwanika. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Seuliwa Simon Cyrus, as earlier introduced. Professor Paul Butler, the Vice President of the Uganda Law Society, Executive Council members of Uganda Law Society is present, and land colleagues who have come for this event. Greetings from the Kingdom of Buganda. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Uganda Law Society for inviting the Kingdom to take part in this very gracious event, the public lecture, whose theme is the rule of law and democracy in Uganda, implications of Donald Trump. I am going to read out the speech verbatim, as was drafted by Attorney General Christopher Bwanika. Just give me a moment, the document is loading. Thank you. The rule of law and democracy in USA and Uganda, let alone the world, is a very pertinent matter that needs to be discussed at all levels of government, global organizations, but most of all, as human beings living in the global village. The state of the rule of law and democracy in Uganda is faced with great challenges, such as the overwhelming case backlog for the judicial officers, limited access to justice, corruption, human rights violations in the form of politically motivated abductions, delayed trials, oppressive and biased law enforcement measures, to mention but a few. With all these present, we still believe there is light at the end of the tunnel. This can be seen by the increased number of judicial officers and increased number of courts that have been created by the government. This also includes the various alternative dispute resolution programs that the government has set up as well. The country is going into an election period where the government has requested the citizenry to not only be peaceful, but not be violent. However, this same government has a duty to respect the citizenry's rights of expression, of association, expression of ideas, expression of values. The state of the rule of law and democracy in the USA has faced a grave challenge of social, political, and economic uncertainty. The continued discriminative shootings, riots, for example, the ones going on in LA by the Hispanic community, the deportations and the trade wars that are all taking place disrupt the law and democracy going on in the United States. The continued politically motivated media crusades that are backed by the multi-billion-dollar corporations, creating facades of their candidates, forgetting the oath of professionalism and diligence owed to the ordinary man, is one of also another major challenge. An example is Donald Trump, the current president of the United States. These same multi-billion-dollar corporations control major stakes in the media field that run the narrative around the world, pushing falsehoods about each and every thing, provided it has an economic impact. This is why, as a kingdom, we encourage Ugandans and persons around the world to promote their own media houses. For example, the kingdom has CBS FM and BBS TV that are media houses of the Buganda kingdom. These campaigns have taken the world away from the key aspects of the rule of law and democracy, which are transparency and accountability. Leaders today are not willing to take responsibility for their actions, errors, and mishaps. They want to depict a clean record which is dishonest and unfair to the citizenry who are entitled to the truth. This grave misinformation is the greatest threat to the modern day rule of law and democracy. The recent travel ban on African countries by the US government, as well as the tariffs to various countries around the world, cannot be taken lightly, as this affects the global international relationship of the USA with the other African countries. This is a great example of how democracy in the USA directly affects Uganda, as this foreign policy decision by the US government has prevented thousands of Africans from various opportunities across the US border. And US opportunities in these countries, for example, Uganda. Despite these decisions by the US government, the Kingdom of Buganda and Uganda still believe in a lasting and purposeful relationship with the USA going forward. This relationship can be greatly improved by continued dialogue and promotion of prioritized projects beneficial to both parties, and of course including the Uganda Law Society as a third party. I wish to give a vote of thanks to the Uganda Law Society for inviting me to attend this auspicious event, and I wish to reaffirm the Kingdom of Buganda's support to the principles of rule of law and democracy in Uganda. USA and all over the globe, as the Kingdom of Buganda is not only Ugandan but worldwide. I believe together we shall achieve much more for the Kingdom, Uganda, and the globe. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Council Cyrus, for that elaborative message. Please send our regards to the Buganda Kingdom. We are friends. We have been there before. The hospitality was very warm. We have a very good affection for the Buganda Kingdom and for what we are fighting for together. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, we are coming to the close. We just want to let you know that there is a meal for us to share with the professor. It doesn't come often. The professor is going to dine with us soon after this. We just have a few moments together. Kindly bear with us. Let's wind up together so that we can have that lunch together. The last or second last part of this function is to let Professor know that the Council of the RNB is very affectionate about rule of law, to the extent that we establish and manage or supervise rule of law clubs in smaller or institutions, universities especially, as well as secondary schools, as well as primary schools. Of course, with the different constraints, we can do so much, and in that regard, we have rule of law clubs in universities, as well as secondary schools. Currently, we have in the House the rule of law club presidents for different universities, and they boldly came unto us, asked the president of the RNB to ask to be given opportunity to give the vote of thanks. And who are we? Today, we present the rule of law club president of Cavendish University to offer a vote of thanks to the professor and Donovan. Please, thank you so much.
A very good afternoon to each one of us. Thank you for sacrificing your time, resources, and support to attend this function. To our Professor Paul Bartley, you're most welcome to Uganda, and we are so delighted to have you. And to the members of the executive, we are also happy to have you. I'm Helen Nyakaisiki, a student from Cavendish University, currently under President Rule of Law, and I'm joining my 4th year in August. I've realized that with the session we've had today, USA is not a lovey-dovey as we've always thought. And for some of us who have a dream to be in the US in the next 3, 4, 5 years, we need to rethink, go back to the, yes, we need to go back to the drawing board and find something to do with our lives. We plan better and we see how we can go through the 3, 4 years without wasting them and without being in US. To the students' body that I've represented today, kindly allow me introduce them. They just swept to you, the President Rule of Law, Bishop Stewart, you're most welcome. The President Rule of Law, King Caesar University. Yes, and to Uganda Law Society, you don't know how much we are humbled. Every time we call you, we disturb you, we want to speak, we want to attend. Sometimes we don't even ask, but you give us the opportunity. We know one time you are like us, and one day we shall be like you, and we look up to that day, and we look up to that time. Thank you so much for mentoring us, for making us better students, better professionals, and we believe we are getting more land, more educated, and more knowledge. Now, I just imagine myself, if I had not gotten this information here, how it would be maybe a year or 2 later. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the opportunity. May God bless you.
All right, thank you so much. Without further ado, we thank you, the students, for gracing the occasion. As you're moving towards this journey, the Radical New is paving the way. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce and invite the Honorable Vice President to give us closing remarks and perspective and guide us on the next agenda item. The Vice President of the Uganda Law Society. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robert. Let's first give him a big hand clap. Professor, I don't know what words I can use for you to have given us this opportunity, but I learned something, that while the time the Constitution, the United States Constitution was being done, the leaders then had a radical approach. That is the one thing I picked from Professor. I don't know if everyone had. Professor, we are also having a radical approach to the aspect of rule of law in Uganda. That is why you see the radical new bar. It's not an old thing, but desperate times call for desperate measures. But on behalf of the Radical New Bar President, the Governing Council, and the membership here, we really do extend our thanks and appreciation, and we thank you. What you heard from the student here is our R&B Vision 2060. They are the vision bearers. They hold the torch because they believe what has been started, what we've begun in the area of promoting rule of law, democratization, decolonization, digital transformation. It is the young generation, the law students who will come after us who will have that vision. That's why it's the Vision 2060. And I believe with these engagements, it's also adding a brick to that. Now, Robert talked about our mandates under Section 3 of the, under Section 3D of the Uganda Society Act. We're a statutory body given a mandate through law, through an act of parliament. And one of it, of the mandates under Section 3D is to assist the public in Uganda on all matters touching the law and matters ancillary to the law. And it's through that segment, that mandate, that we undertake some of these initiatives that will come some of these ideas, because we are working on promotion, protection, and fighting for the rule of law. Now, every week, every Thursday, we do have these engagements where we enlighten the public about matters touching the rule of law. And we are so passionate, the Radical Nuba is passionate about that. When you look around, you're seeing an exhibition of photographs. This was done during it's an exhibition where we profiled one of the media personnel. He's called Abubakar Alboa, and that was during the commemoration of the World Press Freedom Day. What you see around, across board, is a story which could be told by him. For over 10 years, he's been covering various events in the aspect of, anything to do with rule of law, good governance, and all these pictures have appeared in newspapers for over 10 years. So we felt, commemoration of the World Press Freedom Day, a few months before then we had a series of events where some media personnel had been battered trying to cover an election, trying to, to share information. That's why we felt it's important to have this, commemoration of that day, to have this kind of work, so that it reminds us and the members. This is one person who has done that. He has been at the forefront of the worst of situations during riots, where people are being shot, where people are being arrested, and he's been there capturing. He usually captures the best pictures. If you've been for Uganda, before we leave, I'll actually invite all of us to take a look. It was an exhibition which started on the 8th of May from that day, and we decided to leave them so that everyone who comes, I may not be able to tell the story exactly like this journalist, Abubakar Alboa, who honored him that day, but most of them actually speak for themselves. When you look at, you'll move around and see the story, it's a story of rule of law in this country. And this is what has been shot in the national news. Again, from the Radical Nuba leadership and the members, before we take a tour, allow me offer appreciation. We have a few gifts for our speakers, for the professor and Mugisha. Some of you are surprised when you heard Mugisha say, he's called Mugisha. He's been very instrumental in helping us organize and arrange this, because he's been the bridge between us and the professor. I should clap for him. And now that he's Mugisha, we believe that this is just the beginning of a journey. While discussing with Professor the topic he intends to discuss, it was really hard to pick. But Professor, I can't wait for, day will disturb you to discuss for the members, for us, the abolition of prison, yeah, as a worldwide movement. It's interesting, and I'm sure members will be excited to hear that. How does it work? Professor has a very interesting insight to that, and I hope when we come calling, you'll not abandon us, just like you've been here today with us. I believe that will happen. So members, please look out for that discussion. I've put Professor on notice that he will come and discuss for us that. As members, especially, I see a lot of members are interested in criminal justice, which is another area where I tend to have a lot of issues in the country. So please, I'll call upon Senior Counsel Andrew Kasirye to assist me with this next event, and the Secretariat team, please. Again, before I forget, please help me clap for the Secretariat team. They've done great in putting this together. As you're aware, we do not sit here as council, executive council, but our Secretariat team, under the able leadership of Christine Awori, our CEO, have made sure that these programs move as planned. And it is through their able leadership, her able leadership and guidance, that we've even managed to have this put together. So let's give the Secretariat another hand clap. Great. So, Professor, please, we have a small token for you.
It will affect your check-in weight.
So, Professor, we really don't have much, but from the bottom of our hearts, as the Radical New Bar leadership and members, we have a small package for you.
Oh,
yeah, for
that's
you
so
know,
small.
yeah, small.
I hope they put in some money for excess luggage.
No, thank you so much.
All right, here we go.
Thank you.
And Mr. Mujisha, I'll only refer to you as that. We also have a small package for you. It's also from the Radical New Bar leadership and the members of the Uganda Society. We do appreciate your the work you've put in and the fact that you thought about us and brought for us Professor here to share with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Some wonderful clothes.
All right. Thank you very much. And as we bring this to a close, I know Secretary Tim will communicate the next program, but Professor, I'll invite you and other members who are interested to go through this exhibition. It's very important, very interesting. It's a very interesting work of art. We had to partner with a studio to do this work. I invite you to move around and we look at these art pieces as the team communicates to the other members. It's not only for Professor and Mugisha, but the rest of us have not been here before. I'm sure some of us have been here for the first time. But then as I conclude, let me thank everyone who has come here physically first. Let's clap for ourselves. And we also thank the members who have joined us online. It's been a long, interesting day. Personally, I was seated, I didn't want it to end, but this is where we end it. Let's continue the engagement. And we do appreciate that you pick interest in some of these engagements because I believe they will shape our, future engagements and what we do next. Thank you very much and have a good afternoon. Prof, can we have a photo moment here with the professor? Adam, please take charge of it. Yes. But please make sure you don't leave without looking at,
I'm Bakar Ruboa. I am a photojournalist and we are celebrating 12 years. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed colleagues and distinguished guests, it is with immense pride the extraordinary work of Mr. Abubakar Ruboa, our exhibitor in residence for the next few weeks, remains unshaken. My spirit is with you as we unveil through the lens of truth an exhibition that is both a personal milestone and a powerful testament to our shared mission.
To have all of us together in the same room to be able to exchange ideas and celebrate World Press Freedom, I think is a very honorable and wonderful thing. So I'd like to thank the Uganda Law Society for convening this. I'd like to say kudos to my fellow panelists and to everyone in the room.
Abu is a very hardworking fellow. We want to tell the young people out there that there are people that you need to look up to. Abu is one of those and marked over time who is very receptive to new people who join the company.
I want to salute Mr. Abubakar Ruboa for his recognition today. And I honor all media practitioners who continue to report with courage, responsibility, and truth. Protecting rights is not the duty of one institution, it is the duty of every citizen. Many are quick to ask, what is government doing? What is the commission doing? But I ask you instead, what is in your hand? Use it. Use your camera, use your pen, use your voice in court, use your reach on social media, use your platform as a lawyer, use your space as a journalist. Stand up for the truth. Because in the end, the Constitution is only as strong as those who defend it. I thank you once again and wish you fruitful, fearless, and focused deliberations for God and my country.